The Verdict, a Sidebar production, hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crow & Dunlevy sponsors The Verdict. Also sponsored by Delta Dental, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and C.H. Guernsey & Company. Each week on The Verdict, we present an objective discussion of contemporary and legal issues, topical issues that will affect Oklahomans in their daily lives. The Verdict, a Sidebar production.
And welcome to The Verdict. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mick Cornett, and I am joined, as always, by one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. And Kent, today, a couple of special guests coming in.
Yes, we're going to have a little different format than we usually have, but we're having the, what is perhaps our final, but it's the third show on the plight of abused and deprived children in Oklahoma. And we're having some, one familiar face and perhaps two faces that, one of which will be familiar for a different reason and the other unfamiliar, perhaps. But we wanted... last week we spoke with Bill McKinney and Judge Stuart on what the regular representation of children are in Oklahoma County and around the state in the abused and deprived situation. We saw that the courts were very heavily loaded with cases with many, many children, lots of work to do, not enough people to do it. And today we're going to kind of talk about the reinforcements or the backup troops, the volunteers that come in and assist on a regular basis with the representation of these children and providing service to these children. And we're going to have a guest from the court-appointed special advocate program called CASA, and we're going to have a guest from Oklahoma Lawyers for Children. Should be good.
We better get to it. Today we're going to learn more about how Oklahoma deals with abused and deprived children who wind up in the court systems. You're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, and we'll be right back.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
The Verdict is pleased to have as a sponsor C.H. Guernsey & Company, providing architectural and engineering services to clients throughout the U.S. and around the world.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leading at 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick's away.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, who's going to introduce our guests.
Very, very pleased today to have a familiar face to many Oklahomans. Lola Hall join us. Lola, of course, as many of you know, was a TV reporter and anchor in this city and in this county for a number of years. But she's had other careers. She has been the director of women's programs at Mercy Hospital and currently is with an organization called CASA, court-appointed special advocate program, and she's a case manager out at the Juvenile Division and a mother of two. Lola, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. If either of us mess up on the television, you can straighten us out and get us doing it right. On my right is a return guest for his third appearance, the Honorable Roger Stuart, Special Judge of the Juvenile Division. I have introduced Judge Stuart a couple of times, but as you know, he has vast experience in this area, has dealt with literally thousands of children in his career, and has dealt with three more closely than others, as he is a father of three. And welcome back, Judge Stuart.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. For this segment, we want to talk about the Court-Appointed Special Advocate Program. Lola, tell us briefly what that is.
Court-appointed special advocates are volunteers in our community, and their charge is to represent the best long-term interests of the child, so that when working with volunteers, the volunteers are the ones who do the legwork, and they go out and they look at every aspect of the child's life. They are appointed by the judge, which gives them access to all confidential material. So they can not only go to the parents, the foster parents, they get acquainted with all these people, with the children, of course. They can go to the schools, they can go to medical personnel, they can go to therapists. They can go to every aspect of the child's life that impacts that child's life. And so their job is to get a picture, a whole picture of the life, and then to come back to the court with an objective point of view and recommendations to the court. They are not bound, because they are volunteers, not bound by policies and procedures that others are, so that their viewpoint is entirely objective.
We last week had Bill McKinney on, who represents children. My understanding is it's a different position that CASA has.
It is a different position, because the public defender, who represents the child, most children want to go home. That's what they know. No matter how bad the abuse has been, no matter how awful the home. We've seen children who have watched their mother being beat senseless with a baseball bat. They've been beat senseless with a baseball bat. And you say, where do you want to go? They want to go home. And so the public defender must represent that child, and he will say, Your Honor, my client wishes to go home. And we will say, we don't think that that is in the best interest of the child. And so we come in absolutely objective. DHS is there also to talk about the best interests of the child. They too are bound by policy. In many ways, they are expected to represent the policies of the department. We have no such limitations. We can look at the full picture.
Judge Stuart, let me ask you, you appoint a particular person, a particular CASA, or court-appointed special advocate in a particular case. What additional information does this give to you, or perspective does this give to you, that you wouldn't have from the existing personnel?
Well, as Lola said, each of the parties in the case come from a different perspective. No one comes from this perspective of purely advocating for the best interest of the child. CASAs bring to me a wide variety of information about how the child's doing, what the child's preferences are, how the child's maintaining in the home or in a foster home, and makes recommendation that's unbridled by policy, law, and is really a function of common sense. And that's refreshing, and it's also vitally necessary.
The last word in your name is advocate. Does that mean you have to be a lawyer to be a CASA volunteer?
Certainly not. Most of our CASAs are just like everybody out there. They're teachers, they're retired teachers, we have an FBI person, sheriff, we have chiropractors, we have attorneys. We're not limited. They undergo 30 hours of training, but they can, a lot of times, housewives, it's anybody who really cares about children and who has the stomach for this kind of work.
What's the time commitment, and are you looking for people actively?
We're always looking for people. We have about 120, 25 active volunteers. We do constant training. They have the 30 hours of training that they undergo, but we serve about 140 families. But when you look at, we get an average of 1,800 new children into the system every year in Oklahoma County alone, and something like 4,500 open cases, because these cases don't go away in a year. They stay sometimes 4 years. We are just doing the tip of the iceberg We just a fraction. We represent something like 373 children currently. And that's not, as you can see, that's not nearly enough. Now, Judge Stuart, he doesn't give us the easy cases, if there are any easy cases in this system. But so our advocates have their work cut out for them.
Well, what you've just said makes it clear, I think, that there aren't enough CASAs to go around.
Right.
Judge Stuart, knowing that and knowing you can't have a CASA in every case that you have, how do you decide when you're going to have one and when you're not?
Well, Lola's got it exactly right. When I come up into a case where I think that is particularly complex, that we're going to need assistance, or where DHS social worker turnover has caused kind of a gap in services, I'll ask for a CASA. I'll also ask for a CASA, and this is an aspect of their job which is not stated so much but turns out to be true. Kids and families come into our courtroom because of failed relationships, all right? Part of the cure of a failed relationship for a child is establishing a real relationship with someone else. CASAs form those kinds of real relationships, knowledge and love. Just yesterday, I had a CASA appear in my courtroom where a child is inpatient in a mental health facility. On visitation night, and there's a visitation every night, there's no one was coming to see that child, and can you imagine when visitation hours come around and all the kids have their relatives and things show up, he had no one till his CASA was appointed, and she's there every visitation.
Well, we know you need help. Let's look at a graphic that gives us the website for CASA so that our people can contact the CASA organization, www.oklahomacasa.org. Lola, when a person expresses an initial interest in becoming a CASA, what happens next? Do they immediately go to training? Is there some screening involved to make sure they would be appropriate even if they pass the training?
There is screening. We need background checks. We need references. We want to be sure, like everyone, that whoever works with this child is safe to do so. Safety is the utmost importance, of course, in this job like everything else. But when they contact us, we do initial screening interviews. Sometimes people have things in their past on particular issues, and they may not even realize it till they get there. That just is not a good time in their life for them to be a CASA.
In the very brief few seconds we have remaining, a CASA will really have direct contact with the child, not just be doing investigation work.
Oh, absolutely. That is the primary importance, as we get to know the children. And the CASA may be the only consistent person in this child's life. We have such turnover with DHS because they are assigned to do a job that is an impossible job. DHS cannot physically do the job they are assigned to do. So their turnover is terrific. Turnover in therapists is frequent. Turnover in everything is frequent. We want the CASA to be there for that child so they can count on somebody in their life. Often they've not been able to count on their parents.
Ms. Hall, thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for coming by.
Thanks, Mick.
Judge Stuart, I know you'll stick around for one more segment. We'll welcome in a new guest when the verdict returns. American Express Tax and Business Services. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. American Express Tax and Business Services. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311. We are C.H. Guernsey & Company. We provide engineering, architecture, and consulting services to clients across the nation and around the world. Our corporate headquarters are located in Oklahoma City, and we have branch offices across the country, including Tulsa. We have provided quality service to clients for nearly 75 years. At Guernsey, we believe in quality work and unconditional client satisfaction. To learn more about C.H. Guernsey & Company, log on to our website at chguernsey.com.
Mick Cornett and Kent Myers back on The Verdict. We're talking to juvenile judge Roger Stuart and ready to meet another guest.
Very pleased today to have joining us on The Verdict a very close personal friend of mine, Don Nicholson. Don is president of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and is one of the co-founders of that organization. He is an attorney in Oklahoma City that has practiced law many, many years and distinguished himself in that regard, but in very recent years, since 1997, been the prime mover behind the group of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, which is rendering a service to abused and deprived children in Oklahoma County. Don's a University of Oklahoma undergraduate, or graduate, both undergraduate school and law school, is a CASA, works with Lola Hall, whom we just visited with a minute ago, and as if he doesn't have enough to do, he's also a certified public accountant. But Don, personally and professionally, welcome to The Verdict. Really glad you're on.
Well, thank you very much.
We're glad to have you. Now, tell us, we see your very handsome face with all this white hair on our commercials for Lawyers for Children every week on this show. Tell us just briefly, what is Oklahoma Lawyers for Children? What does it do?
Well, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children is a pro bono organization made up of lawyers and non-lawyers to assist children in deprived cases. The lawyers represent the children in the cases. The non-lawyer volunteers either participate in interviewing the children at the shelter and obtaining information for possible placements. And then we have non-lawyer volunteers who also do home assessments. And they receive training and work with the sanction of the Department of Human Services to find appropriate home placements for children. These are the functions that we provide.
Now, these lawyers that represent children, you said it's pro bono. That, of course, means for the good and for free. Does that just include the lawyer's time, or does sometimes the lawyer has to advance money for expenses as well? What's involved?
Well, when the lawyer gets assigned to the case, he does whatever it takes to represent the child. And if it involves expense, he comes with that expense out of his own pocket. So it involves both time and sometimes money.
Judge, I presume these Lawyers for Children volunteers show up in your court from time to time.
Quite frequently.
What's been your experience, or what's been your impression about how they do representing children, either with the public defender or on their own?
My impression has been that they have come in with a little bit of a question as to exactly what juvenile court is all about. But they have also picked up the importance of what we're doing there, and once they're involved, my experience has been that they have thrown themselves into the representation of these children. They brought, as Don mentioned, whatever resources were necessary, and to assist in the representation of the child, from court reporters who donate their time to process servers to investigators. They bring that forward, and so it's made a huge difference.
Don, just approximately, or if you know, how many lawyer volunteers does Oklahoma Lawyers for Children have?
Well, we're growing constantly, but at this point in time, we have 337 volunteer lawyers.
And that's just Oklahoma County?
Oklahoma County.
How about non-lawyer volunteers?
We have roughly 60 volunteers who do the interviews with the children at the shelter.
Can we focus on that a little bit and just tell our viewers what those volunteers do at the shelter for those kids?
All right. The volunteer makes it a point, 7 days a week, holidays or otherwise, to be there to interview the children on their first morning there at the shelter. And they interview these children for two reasons. They interview them, one, just to comfort the child and let them know that somebody is interested in them. And second, they're trying to glean information from the children, if they're old enough to give it, about possible relatives or friends that might be a suitable placement for the child so that they don't have to end up in some type of foster care placement.
Judge Stuart, let me ask you about that. You've seen this system work a long time. Do you think that's an important service, the interviewing of the child in the shelter after the child's been brought in from the home?
Absolutely, and as we've discussed before, shelter is supposed to be a temporary type placement. Many times, and whether when a child gets moved out of the shelter is depending on when we can find an appropriate placement for them. When the Volunteers for Children came forward, Lawyers for Children came forward and started working on this, it took about 30 to 90 days to be able to go out and talk to relatives and get these home studies done, and that would be time that a child would be in a shelter often. Since Lawyers for Children, I believe they've cut that down. I've actually had them go out the very day that a child has come in and we've had a hearing in my court. They've gotten someone to go that day, and I think they average about, what, 7 days?
Well, actually, we do a little better than that. I think it's 4.5 to 5 days. That's our average.
Well, it's fantastic.
Now, let's make sure we're clear on what we're talking about here. This is another service besides visiting the child in the shelter. This is a separate service trying to find a trying to make a home assessment.
Yes, and we have a whole different group of volunteers who've received different training, qualifying them to do these home assessments and or home studies. And when we're asked by the Department of Human Services to provide a home study, we try and do it as quickly as we can, because as you've got to understand that the children are oftentimes locked in the shelter waiting on a suitable home. And so we do it as quickly as we can, and our average is between 4 and 5 days turnaround.
And how many approximately assessments do you do a week or a month, however you think of it?
Well, I don't have that figure readily available, but I think we do 3 to 5 a week on an average.
Okay. Judge Stuart, as we finish up this segment, we're also finishing up this 3-part series. What are your views about the system? What are your views about Lawyers for Children, CASA, the Public Defender's Office? Anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Kent, Mick, the Verdict, and the sponsors of the Verdict for running this series. One of our problems that we have in the juvenile system is that confidentiality has made it a secret to a lot of the folks in Oklahoma County. And as I told you on the first show, I believe that the future for these children, while government can do many things, it can't fix the whole problem by itself. And the future progress, if we're going to make any, really lies with the developing community-type services, getting these volunteers to come in and Lawyers for Children and programs like CASA to become foster parents, to make them aware of what the needs are. And I'm convinced if the public knows what the needs are, and if they know what it is they can do to meet those needs, that they'll come forward.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. Judge Stuart, thanks for coming by. Mr. Nicholson, as always, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have some final words when we return.
Let me say happy birthday to Crow Dunleavy, one of the prestigious law firms in the state of Oklahoma. And our relationship over the last 20 years that I've been state auditor, I've grown to appreciate that law firm more and more each year, and each time we have business to transact together. Their community involvement, as well as the knowledge to bring to the law firm, is something that Oklahoma should be very, very proud of. I know I am. And at 100 years in business, you can't be all bad by doing that. And I salute you, congratulate you, and wish you a very happy birthday.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're not only wrapping up this show, but really part of a 3-part series.
Yes, we realized going into these shows that there was more information that needed to be given to our viewers than what could be covered in a single show, and therefore we tried to break it down somewhat logically. I think if a summary would be appropriate, I would like to suggest that what we have seen is a system that is flooded with children that have not done anything wrong, but nevertheless are in the juvenile justice system and may or may not go home ever again. They may go to a foster home or they may be adopted, but literally thousands of children each year are in Oklahoma County in that circumstance. And there is a grid or a framework of people and organizations that are working to help those children. The Public Defender's Office, led by Bob Ravitz, Bill McKinney, and his crew, do just a wonderful job representing these children. CASA, as evidenced by Lola Hall's commitment and dedication, they do a wonderful job providing a different kind of service. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, led by Don Nicholson, and their 300 and so on attorney volunteers, provide services to try to supplement the representation of the kids. Howard Hendrick, who was on our first show, his caseworkers are always out there doing the best they can for these kids. I think the evidence is overwhelming that if a child that is put into this system as an abused and deprived child gets a good result, the chances of them staying out of trouble in the system are greatly enhanced. If they come into this system as abused and deprived and get a bad result, the chance of them coming back into this system as a delinquent is very high. The likelihood is very high. If they come back in as a delinquent, their chance of coming back into the criminal justice system as an adult offender is exponentially enhanced. And if we can, at this first step, give them a great result, either get them back with their family with conditions corrected, or get them to get the parental rights terminated, whatever makes the most sense. But get them a good result, get them a good home. Society is better off at each stage of this child's life, not to mention the child being better off.
Certainly.
These people we've been dealing with the last 3 weeks, not to leave out Judge Stuart and his colleagues, but that's what they do every day, and that's what they do for you and me, and we owe them a great debt of gratitude.
Website for the Oklahoma Lawyers for Children?
Yes, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children is www. all strung together there, oklahomalawyersforchildren.com. I might mention that that's my finger, and that's my daughter Rachel's fingers at 20 minutes of age back 14 years ago. But proud to be a member of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and we take all kinds of volunteers. And not to mention what we'd like to hear from our viewers on our own verdict website. If they've got shows they'd like to see us do, we'd love to know about it, get in touch with us, let us know what you'd like to hear.
All right, we'll see you again next week. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers on The Verdict.